Showtime!
Hey everyone, this is Niko bringing you a standard NU match with my opponent Anubis from Snow Point League. Um, I lead off with Dream World Volbeat, and my opponent leads off with Mag Motor. Now, ordinarily I would switch, but I decided to stay in and go for the Confuse Ray just to see if I can get the self-inflicted hit that Confuse Ray does. So Mag Motor becomes confused and luck of all luck, Magmotor hits himself. So at this point, I decided not to stay in and withdraw my Volbeat and send in my Samurott Amura. Amura is one of my favorite Pokemon in my arsenal. She is always taking out Pokemon unexpectedly because everybody does not think she's that hardcore. But Samurott is hardcore. So he switches out Magmotor, and I go for the Sword Dance. And he sends in Slowking, thinking that Slowking is going to wall Amura. But I get the +1 attack, and I go for the Mega Horn, so right now my attack is boosted, and Amura's whole item is Muscle Band, which makes um, Megahorn even that more crazy, and it nails his Slowking for super effectiveness and Slowking faints. So he sends back in the Mag Motor, and at this point I'm thinking that thing has Thunderbolt, so I'm just gonna use Aqua Jet and pray to God I don't get the Flame Body, but Magmotor does not take the Aquajet well. It's super effective, and before it dies, its flame body gets activated. So I'm like, ugh, there goes Amura's definite reign of terror. So she gets burned, and he sends out Electos. So I go for my second favorite move on 5th gen, Razor Shell, hoping to get the special the defense drop, and I do, and my opponent goes for Home Claw, which I don't understand why, but I would use Coil on Electros over Home Claw, but he gets the attack raise and the accuracy raise, and I get burnt, and he decides to withdraw his Electos and send in his Machoke. So I go for the Razor Shell again, and Razor Shell does pretty much decent damage on his Machoke. And at this point, I misclick and I go for Mega Horn instead of going for Razor Shell again, and it's not very effective, and I pay for it because his opponent, like any other person would use, Dynamic Punch, and he does it, and I become confused, and I'm burnt. So I just go for the Aqua Jet, hoping to get off a little bit more damage, but Amura is confused, and the confusion hits myself, and I faint, and his Macho goes for Bullet Punch, but there's no Pokemon there to Bullet Punch. So I send in my Persia, predicting that he would stay in, but my opponent switches out his Machoke and sends in his Doug Trio. So I go for Fake Out, and it nails Doug Trio for a considerable amount of damage. And then my opponent goes for Earthquake, and Earthquake completely takes out my Persian, which I was not expecting. So Persia faints. So I send in Melina, and what I should have done here when he did his Earthquake was use Sleep Powder on his Doug Trio before I use Giga Drain, but I just wanted to get rid of that thing because I think it was Choice Banded and it was just like really wrecking shop. So instead of doing Sleep Powder, I do Giga Drain and I get rid of his Doug Trio, get some life up, and Melina's life is back up. So he sends in his Zangoose, and his Zangoose uses Retaliate, and as everyone knows in 5th gen, Retaliate works when a Pokemon on that opponent team faints and it's like highly hit hard. So he kills Melina, but not before Effect Spore takes in and I get the Parahax, which is good. So I use this opportunity to send in Mongoose and try for the Belly Drum Extreme Speed setup because Mongoose came from a Zigzagoon that I got off of Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire for the Nintendo GameCube. So he uses Retaliate and it nails Mongoose and also gets a critical hit. So I'm like, dead father, he died. So I send in Vixen and my opponent decides to switch out his Zangoose and send back in his Machoke. At this point, I go for the coil, which raises my attack and my defense and my accuracy. I mostly have coil on Vixen because of a certain move that does not have a high accuracy. So he goes for the dynamic punch, and I take it pretty well. I'm confused, and I go for the move that coil is basically for on Vixen, which is Zap Cannon. And Zap Cannon nails Machoke. So his Machoke faints, and Vixen gets life up. So my opponent decides to send back in this beastly Anubis, aka Zangoose, and I go for the brick break and I get it. I don't hit myself. So right now I'm feeling pretty good because I'm getting lucky because Vixen is confused and she's still hitting his Pokemon without getting the self-inflicted hit. So I get more life up from leftovers and he sends in his Electros and his Rock Slide misses. I'm still confused, but I avoid the attack and then I pull off another Zap Cannon. So at this point, I know my opponent is like really pissed because I'm getting really, really lucky. So I don't really care about it not being effective. I just care about it paralyzing my opponent. So I get the leftovers, and my opponent decides to just resign from the game altogether. So good game, my friend. Definitely check out Victini Dream World. The link is in the video. Thanks for watching.